So welcome everyone to the Preschool Mindfulness Summit. Today I'm really excited to introduce you to Sue Langley. She is the CEO and founder of the Langley Group, which is based in Australia. She's a very well-known speaker and consultant and leadership expert. She has a master's in neuroscience, and part of Langley Group is that they develop and run the diploma in positive psychology and well-being, which I took, and Sue was our wonderful teacher and facilitator, and that's how we met. I think it was about 5 or 6 years ago now, and that is an amazing program. If anybody's interested, we'll post more information about that. But thank you so much, Sue, for joining us and coming on the summit today.
Thank you for inviting me, Helen. It's good to be here. Good to see you again.
Nice to reconnect. So most of the people watching today are somehow involved with young children working in preschools or in early primary or teaching about early childhood. So a lot of people are familiar with mindfulness, but maybe you can just explain a little bit more about what positive psychology is and how mindfulness links with that.
Yes, so I think one of the interesting things about positive psychology, we work globally, and I've noticed in different parts of the world, some people are really familiar with what positive psychology is, and some people have the really wrong impression of what positive psychology is. The way I think of it is the science of human flourishing. It's about how we as individuals, teams and organisations and communities can be the best we can be. One component of that, of course, is positive education. So positive psychology encompasses a lot, including mindfulness and strengths and organisational settings, etc. But of course, the positive education is a key component, because if we can embed positive psychology strategies and tools into the school environment, then it helps people later on in life. Most of us get to age 40 and then we're, a bit screwed up. So we need to get earlier.
Definitely, yeah. Yeah, I think that's such a good point. Is I hear over and over again, like, why didn't we learn this when we were kids? So so tell us a little bit about, I know you do lots of work in schools with school leadership and with teachers. So what are some of the ways that we can bring in or help ourselves, I think, as teachers, because I think it's quite a stressful job sometimes. So what are some of the things that we can do to create that balance in our life and reduce the stress that teachers often feel?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And if you look at the research says that if you as a teacher are not practicing, for instance, your strengths or mindfulness or whatever these resilience strategies will be, then the children won't get it. You can teach them the theory, but if you're not practicing it as the teacher, it doesn't have the same impact. And there's quite a few studies that have actually found that it's the teachers that live and breathe it that have the impact on children, not the teachers that just teach it. And we kind of know that, but it's nice to have the research back up what we know. I think the other thing as well is, as teachers, the valuable thing with teachers is most of them are lifelong learners anyway. They love the whole learning aspect. Yeah. So the key thing I would say as a teacher and a principal is learn this science yourself and practice it. Because, we talk about stress and burnout, but there's some awesome science and research about what we call the upside of stress, and really how to turn that stress around so that you're using it in a positive way, a challenge response or a befriend response, rather than the fight, flight, freeze. There are so many tools and strategies around building resilience. But often, and I know it sounds ridiculous, but teachers spend all their time learning what to teach the children, but they're often not learning the science of positive psychology or human flourishing that's going to make them a better person, that makes them show up as a better teacher. So a lot of the work that we're doing in schools at the moment has been on teacher wellbeing, principal wellbeing and positive leadership programs, so that if the teachers are in a better space, they can do this. And I don't know what it is in other parts of the world, but I know in Australia in particular, all teachers now are told they have to teach wellbeing. And that's a massive pressure on teachers, because most of the teachers have no clue how to teach it. And I don't mean they're stupid, they're not. But they've got all this curriculum stuff, and they've got to hit certain targets with regard to exam results, etc. And we're going to ask them to teach wellbeing. And unfortunately, some of these teachers are like, I don't know where to start.
What am I supposed to do? Yeah.
Yeah, and we get a lot of teachers come on our diploma. Like literally every program of 20, there's probably at least a quarter of those are teachers.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, I think it is becoming more and more kind of mandated around the world, but maybe without actually providing the training that's needed to do that. So hopefully that'll change in the future.
We just did a group of teachers up in a particular remote area of Australia. So they all got together, rather than them coming to the cities where the 6 days face-to-face is, we went to them. And so their Catholic Education Office, they got a group of 20 people together, and they're all from remote schools. And they were all saying, we know we have to do this, but we really have no science, no rigor, no knowledge. We're kind of reading things and scrambling. But the value of sort of coming together and getting that intense practical knowledge, they found hugely beneficial. So I do think it will become more and more, and I think it needs to become more and more prevalent in schools.
Yeah, it's. I think it's so important, and just the culture of the school as well, right? Sometimes you walk into a school and you can feel it's very like a negative environment, or you go in another school and you just automatically have that positive feeling to it, and I think that comes from the teachers working together and having the strategies in place. So tell us a little bit about I know you're an expert in neuroscience, so tell us a little bit about the science, maybe with young children, but also with teachers as it relates to positive psychology and dealing with stress, and then changing our focus to becoming more positive and more happy.
Cool. Well, I love the neuroscience stuff. I think understanding the brain really helps us understand why we do the things that we do, and we're learning more and more now. So I think the neuroscience element is just fascinating.
Yeah.
We all know, and I'm sure many teachers out there know, that an infant's brain and a child's brain is not as developed in certain areas. Front to back, as in the neurons sort of grow lots more towards the back part of the brain, which is a lot of that functional drive and energy and whatever but the prefrontal cortex is kind of the last to develop, and that's our thinking, strategizing, paying attention, decision-making type. And I'm sure all of us know many teenagers who don't yet have that turned on, and we were probably exactly the same when we were teenagers.
Exactly.
I think it's really important to understand that brain development, and I know a lot of teachers do learn about that as part of their training. But just reminding ourselves of that, for instance, I think a classic example is ADHD. We often want to give kids drugs for ADHD. But actually ADHD sorts itself out naturally anyway. If you can put up with that attention deficit that we talk about, it's because the brain isn't processed enough for the prefrontal cortex to self-regulate. So it's almost like we have to work harder. And again, teachers will know this, kids get distracted. And we do as adults now, particularly as well, but kids do get distracted. So we need to understand that that's how the brain works, and is just drugging them up really the answer to them learning.
Yeah.
There are other things we know from neuroscience. So the whole visual, auditory, kinesthetic learning styles has actually been debunked from a brain perspective. It's that everybody is kind of everything, and we need to have all that sensory information. And we know that from positive psychology and emotional intelligence. If you bring that emotional component in where all of my senses are engaged, then I'm way more likely to learn and take in new information. And again, teachers kind of know this. If you get stuff with Play-Doh, or you doing things where you're sort of touching and feeling and seeing and hearing, then it engages learning. So I think we know all this stuff and we know what science is proving, if you like, but sometimes we're not using it from a neuroscience perspective. There's a really great book that I love. A guy called Matt Lieberman wrote a book called Social, and it's all about social neuroscience and human connection and so on. But there's actually a chapter at the back, and I know there are many other books written about the brain and classroom and learning, but this has a chapter at the back that says, if we knew all of this and we put it in place in the classroom, this is what a classroom would look like. And it's just brilliant. It's sort of talking about the fact that children will engage as one person if I'm more introverted and so on. We've got things like that children will hold off showing their prowess at something if it means they lose a connection and a sense of belonging in a group. So I'll pretend I'm more stupid than I am because I don't want to lose the friendship of my group. I don't want to be seen as the swot in class, these sorts of things. So again, it's sort of understanding what's most important to the child's brain. But I think the other thing, if we go to teachers, that neuroscience, I use the brain stuff all the time, every single day. So I know that fundamentally, if I'm getting eat, sleep and exercise, my brain is going to work a lot better. And sometimes, again, from a wellbeing perspective, we're not looking after ourselves. If I'm really busy and I'm traveling a lot, my number one thing is sleep. Okay, sleep comes first. Eating good food comes next. Exercise comes next. I get those fundamentals in place. And I know that sounds really obvious, and we know this, but we're not always doing it. That's what I think is critical. Everyone listening to this knows these basics of how to keep your brain healthy. And I'm not talking about, you're exercising so you get a six-pack. That's up to you. If you want a six-pack and you want to have muscles, great. But it's about what your brain does, and your brain needs this basic stuff. So I think the neuroscience element tells me that. There's so much more that I can go into to do with learning and things like that, about how the brain learns. But I think the interesting thing is we kind of know it, but for some reason, sometimes we're not doing it. We are relying more on technology. We still want to do structured learning, and yet we know, well, for instance, play in children, not just play of whatever you want to do, but play that involves intricacies. So I don't know about you, but I remember as a kid, we would turn our furniture upside down and we would make caves, we would crawl under blankets, and you'd make this whole game up where there were rules, and one of you would say, no, you can't do this because we said this, and you'd make up all these rules and you'd all stick to it, and it would go on for hours. That sort of constructive play with rules that requires you to self-regulate, that requires you to hold off on your impulses because the rule says you're doing this, or kids playing guards will stand still 4 times longer than if you just tell a child to stand still. That structured play we're sometimes losing, and yet actually that's been shown to increase brain development more so than just standard learning.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, really interesting points. I remember from when we did the training together, you one of the things that you said is, to not have so much information and stress that you wear the same like you have your training outfit same color, and that's what you wear. And I always thought that was such a great way of just having one less thing on the list, and that's part of self-care, I think, just not having to worry about those extra things, and we know that it's so important for teachers to take care of themselves and have that self-care, as you mentioned earlier, so the students, you embody it. And then if you're always not having time and taking care of yourself and running around, it's hard to instill that in young children. So what other tips would you give teachers about their own kind of self-care?
I think just picking up on what you said, if we think about how the brain works, we know that things that you have as habits are easier. They don't. So as you know, I talk about brain fuel, as in, how much fuel have you got in your brain, and your habits don't take much fuel. So to your point, because I travel a lot, I always wear black, when I work because I can unpack, repack. I know I've always got what I need. I never have to waste my brain fuel on what shall I wear. Because just like many of the people listening, I'm a teacher, I'm a facilitator. I'm there to facilitate learning and growth. So I want my brain fuel to be focused on the people that I'm facilitating that learning with. I don't want to be wasted it on, what am I going to eat this morning, or what am I going to wear this morning, or those simple things. So I think from a self-care perspective, anything you can do to create rituals is really useful. And I'm not saying you remove all the curiosity and the interest in the new. It's a balance. But the functional stuff, get rid of it. Make it habitual, make it easy, make it simple, so that you've got the fuel that you need in order to do the good stuff. I can't think of anything better of learning growth and curiosity and all those sorts of things. During my Christmas break, I'm online learning things, reading papers, reading research, etc., because I want that learning and growth. But I don't want to be wasting my brain fuel on the everyday. So I think from a self-care perspective, your basic things of eat, sleep, and exercise are good. But even little things that you can ritualize, that you can simplify, and again, everybody sort of hears this. People who are trying to lose weight, they always say on diets, on a Sunday, prepare all of your meals and your meal plan for the week. So you don't have to think about what you're going to eat. And the reason that works is from a neuroscience perspective. When I get home at 8 o'clock at night and I'm tired and I've had a big day and kids have been screaming at me all day, if my brain fuel is low, I'm going to reach for the pizza. Whereas if I've got things planned, it's easy to reach for the container with the today's dinner in it. So I think things that you can ritualize, things that you can simplify is good. I also think if you look at what we've learned from positive psychology and what creates high levels of well-being, is it's also making habitual those positive psychology elements. Really simple little things like your gratitude, your kindness, your mindfulness, all of those little things, those savoring, those noticing. If you can almost make them so that they're things you do every day that boost yourself. I mean, I have the weird things, I still smile first thing in the morning. I had to get up at 5 o'clock this morning and I laid there, and it was only half an hour earlier than normal, but it was dark, and I'm like, oh, and I hadn't had as good a night's sleep, but it was still, big grin on my face. Okay, get up, get on. So I think putting some of those little things in, and again, I'm not trying to teach people to suck eggs here. People know this, but we don't always do it. So the phrase we often use is, you know it, do you do it? So let's actually put these things in place for ourselves.
Yeah, so important and so true. It's very different just to read about it than to actually implement it, isn't it? And I think even small things can make such a huge difference if you do them consistently. So, really great advice. So, Sue, can you just talk a little bit more about strengths? And so I know a lot of schools that I go into, sometimes they're kind of trying to improve all the weaknesses in staff and children and things. So what does it look like when you play to people's strengths instead of the opposite?
Yeah, look, it's a really good question, Helen, and I think the strength stuff, it blows me away, actually, what I see people doing with it and the results that they get. So not just the research, but the people that we work with who then go on and run with it. And I think there are sort of two levels. So a lot of schools use the VIA, because the VIA, which is the Values in Action Signature Strength Survey, which is freely available, which is why we use it in schools, is really useful to start a conversation. It's great to play with the kids, to get them to create something, put them up on walls, for teachers to be going, my greatest strength is perspective, or mine is gratitude, or mine is kindness, whatever it happens to be. And I think it's really good for starting a conversation. It's really good if you can get the mindset around strength. So it's not just doing the assessment and going, this is my strength. But it's the mindset around strengths that when you're as a staff group in the staff room and you're talking about the kids that you've had in your classroom, can we reframe the really annoying things about those kids into strengths? Are they being disruptive because actually they have leadership as a strength and they want to be able to take that lead? Can we reframe things? So there's a mindset around, rather than just doing it, we have to again embody it. But the other thing that I really like, and you probably know we include on the diploma, is the strengths profile. Now, some people may have heard of Strengths Finder. The Strengths Profile takes strengths to the next level, and you wouldn't use it with children, but we use it with a lot of our schools, with the teachers and the principals, because it really looks at workplace-based strengths. And this is where I've really seen people make a difference from a teacher perspective. Of being able to reframe roles. So job crafting comes up in positive psychology. So being able to recraft. Now, if you're a teacher, you're a teacher and you still have to teach. But what you're doing is you're leveraging different strengths in order to teach better, to show up as the best version of you. And we've just worked, one of my team just worked with a school down in Tassie, and I've got 2 schools next week that I'm working with. And what we're doing is talking about, well, are there certain parts of the job that can be recrafted as a team within a school? Maybe somebody is taking on something that when you look at their strengths, it's really draining them. So how do we shift those roles and shift those activities? And again, we use this in our world. I had someone in my team last year who was not really performing certain aspects of the roles the way that they would have been ideal. I had to have one of those very tough conversations of, this is not working. But interestingly, it was a brilliant conversation, because we pulled out her strengths and we said, okay, this is when I see you at your best. This bit's not working. How do we shift and craft so that you can play to your strengths? Since we did that, she is absolutely hitting every goal that I could possibly hope for. She's flourishing, she's doing well, she's loving it. So this is where I've seen it work really well from a teacher perspective, but it's taking the VIA to the next level.
Yeah, I love that as well. We'll put the link in under this video for the assessment if anybody wants to take it, because it's really useful to learn about yourself and just to see how you could use it in school or in staff meetings, as Sue said. So just before we finish today, Sue, if you had to just leave everyone with one thing that you would really like them to take away about positive psychology, either for themselves personally or for their work with children, what would that message be that you would want them to remember and to stick in their minds?
That's a really good question, and this is not a plug for plug's sake of our diploma. Our diploma is fabulous. I totally believe our diploma is fabulous.
I can attest to it.
But the thing that I would say is get some proper learning. And I know that's really tough on top of everything else, but I'll give you an example. So I was in the UK recently, and I was talking to teachers and people in the corporate space, people who've got this title of wellbeing consultant. And I had got a sense from previous visits that people were not really 100% sure, but I thought I'd test it this time. And I asked people, what is positive psychology? What is learned optimism? I was asking to try and get their input. And the thing that I actually found quite disappointing is they didn't really they thought they knew, they were articulating something. And I'm sitting there going, that is so not what it is.
Yeah.
So I think the key thing that I would say is get some learning around this. We created the diploma deliberately to be a vocational qualification because we want people to be able to grab onto it. And I think that's the thing that comes out of the diploma and other things is really knowing what it is and what it isn't, but then having the science to back up what you're going to do. Because the reason being, as a teacher, when you're trying to bring these things to life, if you've got the science behind it and you get it, you can tweak how you bring it to life in about 50 different ways.
Yeah.
If you don't know the science behind it, what you're going to do is what somebody has told you should do steps 1 to 10, and you just roll it out and you wonder why it doesn't work. And I'll give you an example. So we're collaborating with Geelong Grammar. They're known to be one of the sort of leaders in this space, positive education, etc. And we're doing a whole bunch of things this year with Geelong because they're finding the same sort of thing, that teachers are wanting to do this wellbeing stuff, but not really being able to apply it. And we've had some great conversations that everybody thinks, so mindfulness is a classic example. Mindfulness is awesome. It's a great strategy. It's a wonderful part of positive psychology. But if you try and do mindfulness with adolescent boys, you're going to hit some issues and you're going to go, well, positive psychology told me mindfulness will work. Well, there are certain things that don't work. You know, we had somebody that I know who was in this space suddenly decided starting with loving kindness meditation with a bunch of bankers was a good idea. Right. If you know the science behind it, you don't start people off with loving kindness meditation. So I think for me is really get a qualification or get some science, get some robustness behind it. And even to the extent was we had somebody from Melbourne Uni who does a master's in positive psych. She came on our diploma. She said initially, she told everybody, I'm only coming with my friend. I'm coming to Byron because I want the retreat. I probably won't stay in the 6 days in the classroom, you know, because I know all this stuff. I teach it. In the end, she didn't miss a single minute of the 6 days. And at one point, she looked at me and she said, I've been teaching this wrong for 4 years. Yeah. So my tip is get qualified, get the learning, get the science. Yes, if you want to come on our diploma, we would love that, but get something tangible. Don't just read around the edges and do the fluffy stuff.
Yeah, I think that it's so important because we see people grasping or just reading an article that might not even be based in science and things. And I just want to say, you know, for anyone watching, like the diploma, I go on so many trainings and courses, and I'm like a learning junkie, and it really is like the best one that I've done. It's so comprehensive. It changes you personally, but also, you know, you get all this professional knowledge, and so it's 6 days live, right? And it's intense, like it's full entire days, but it's really fun, and it's amazing. And then it was 18 months online, isn't it? Where you
so people usually take around 9 to 12 months maybe to do the assessments and things. And I think I consider myself very lucky. The thing that gets me out of bed every morning is I would get a minimum of 1 email a day from a student telling me that it's changed their life. I've got one in my inbox right now that came in this morning that somebody is just oozing this, oh my God, this was just amazing. But the thing that I think is really interesting, and I never would have expected it to happen, is people actually email me more about how much they enjoyed the assessments. So they love the 6 days face-to-face intensive, but the assessments. And I think the reason why is positive psychology is not a spectator sport. You don't just come to 6 days and learn the theory. You have to apply it. And I think that's also why it works really well for teachers, is because they have to then do the assessments back in their classrooms and back in their schools. So you're almost seeing positive psychology just come to life, whether you like it or not.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. And you run them in a lot all over Australia, but also in London and sometimes in other countries, right? I did mine in Canada.
So we'll have to travel from all over.
Yeah, we'll have the information about that, and also there's a link to Sue's website where she has all kinds of videos from presentations she's done and different videos around different areas of positive psychology. So check those out. But thank you so much for coming and sharing all those different areas and ideas with us watching, and how we can bring more positive psychology into schools and create, you know, a better future for children and for ourselves. So thanks so much, Sue.
Thank you, Helen. I really appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and I hope to maybe get to meet you one day.
Thanks.